Hello and welcome to the CodCast. I'm Chris. This is a special live streamed edition with Tim Miller, our South Australian Operations Manager, coming in from our SA office to talk about what's been going on. I was sent this earlier to review this week and was rather surprised to see a 339-page plus appendices document. So enormous amount of work, and there's only so much you can say in a short ASX release. So Tim, over to you. Can you give us a bit of background and colour? What's going on? What is this document all about and why does it matter?
Sure. Thanks, Chris. The document we're referring to is the Department of Energy and Mining's the draft scoping report. So we've spoken about this scoping process with the department before on the CodCast, and this is the second last step towards finalising that process. Now, the draft scoping report itself is basically a summary of all of our proposed operations, and those proposed operations can be include environmental and social impacts. We look at all the potential impacts across the project and included with the operations that we intend to do, and break it down into, I guess, a scope of studies that will help us reach eventually our mining lease application. Now, it's been a big amount of work, and I must say our good friends at JBS&G have done a massive amount of work in helping us on that environmental front and helping us to pull it together, which has been a real advantage.
Yeah, JPS&G have been fantastic to work with, haven't they? And obviously reading it, as a huge amount of information goes into this document. Working with me, you know, one of my catchphrases is I want to scope, a plan and a budget. And one of the beautiful things about this document is that not only does it differ in terms of the traditional approvals process in a lot of places, but it really does force you, and it becomes a kind of a contractual agreement with the government, what the scope and the plan of work is. And of course, from that, you can form a budget. So you were talking to me a little bit about this earlier, weren't you, in terms of the budgeting and the way that this works?
That's right. So essentially, now the department has our draft scoping report. They'll take a look over it. They'll farm it out to the different agencies. That's everything to looking at the groundwater, dust, EPA. We'll look at all the different sections. And basically, when they come back to us, our final report will be gazetted and published, and that's a set term of reference that we can use moving forward. Now, you're referring to the budget and timeline, and that's my favourite part about this whole process. At the end of this, we'll have a defined critical path that we can concentrate not only our time, but our money as well, so we can I guess have the best efforts moving forward. You're not wasting time on studies early that don't need to happen until the end. It helps us identify studies that are just a desktop study, so we can fit that into our timeline along the way. But it also identifies the critical studies, like groundwater, for example, a very important study that needs to happen, an important baseline that could take two plus years of baseline data. So it helps us identify that. We want to get onto that soon. We can start the process, and so you don't get to the end ready for the mining lease and realise, oh, we needed X amount of months or years worth of data that you simply don't have.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, obviously, project management theory, the critical path is effectively the most important timeline that is defining how long something takes. You talked about groundwater in 30 minutes time. We're kicking off that study. Both jumping back online for that. And in my experience, I've obviously been a study manager before earlier in my career. The big holdups are always really two things in approvals, and approvals are usually on your project critical path. The first is when people don't do stuff that is time critical and needs to be done, either because it's got a long baseline or because, you know, you get to summer and you realize you haven't done your spring survey. So that's why you see in some companies timeframes completely blowing out, because people haven't got on top of that. Now, that's not the code of culture, as everyone knows. But this document is fantastic because it formalizes that with experienced consultants right the way through, doesn't it? One of the major holdups, again, I've seen in some jurisdictions, is that there's a one-size-fits-all approach. Every project has to do every study to the same level, whether it's particularly relevant or not. Tim, we were talking about this earlier. Perhaps you can sort of explain why South Australia is so advanced in this form and why this submission is really so helpful to us.
Sure. So because of the remoteness of the Elizabeth Creek project, it allows us to take certain impacts or potential impacts, and I like to use dust and noise, for example. So because of the remoteness, dust and noise impacts or potential impacts aren't going to be as important, or sorry, the in-depth of studies isn't going to be as much as if we were closer to a bigger city. So we might be able to get away with a desktop study, for example, with those impacts, rather than if we were closer to Adelaide, we might have to have a far more in-depth set of studies to back that up.
Yeah, so one of the great things about the project is obviously it's remote in terms of sort of how it's located and where the mining will take place, but we're 2.5 hours from Port Augusta and 15, 20 minutes from the Stuart Highway. So yeah, one of the great advantages of this, and again, I've seen in Western Australia, for example, this one-size-fits-all approach. There's no right sizing. This entire point of the scoping document is to set the scope of every approval. The ones that will need to be done more in depth, the ones that will need to be done less in depth. So next stages with this will go to various departments, and again, big advantage in SA is that we kind of have a coordinator, don't we? We're not running to 20 different departments ourselves. Is that right?
That's right. So Paul Thompson at DEM is heading, it's his baby, this whole scoping operation. So he takes that on board, and Paul and his staff will help farm that out to the different agencies, which again helps us. We're not trying to figure out who's this best to go to. They'll have all that covered. And then once we get that feedback, it's all in one big document. We can have the agency feedback, and then we can work on that to build our final scoping report.
Yeah, bit of a dream situation, really. A one-stop shop, superb support, exceptional consultants, and thanks to JBS&G for all their hard work as well, and just a great location for a project.
Sure is.